afternoon. I am very happy to be here meeting all the industry colleagues. And I think it's very nice to have these in-person events after COVID so that we can see each other and talk to each other. So glad to be here. And today I would like to cover a little bit on the topic of cybersecurity. I think one of the most talked about topics that we have in the mobility sector at this point of time. And why is it important? One sec. Okay. So when we look at the mobility industry as a whole, what is the industry aiming for? There are three parameters which are driving the entire industry, which is the joy of use and ease of use as well as the safe driving. These are the three things predominantly which are there, which means that we are talking about three things here again, which is safety and security, which is very important in the mobility space, and connectivity, always connected to the internet, and personalized experience. And the 5 mega trends which are actually behind this is EXE, which is nothing but electrified, automated, connected, shared, and now the newly added one, which is yearly updated. And the yearly updated also makes a big difference, mainly because when in the earlier times, once the car went out of the production, we always felt that the value of the car is, there is no change in the value of the car. But now we see that the value of the car keeps increasing because a lot of new features get added through the OTA and the other topics there. So what we are seeing is that we have a classic vehicle, which is getting transformed into a software-defined IoT vehicle, IoT device. And I would say that it is an IoT device on wheels, which is permanently connected to the internet. And like our smartphones, it is very clear that the kind of vulnerability that we have with respect to any of the IoT device which is connected, it is there in the automobile sector also. And during the introduction, as rightly told, probably cybersecurity was a topic which is existing in the other areas long back. Yeah, and in the automotive space, we are talking about it for the last, I would say, 8 or 9 years, not before that. And why is it becoming very important? It is getting important because software is eating the car quite a bit, and the number of lines of code which are there inside a vehicle, as you can see, starting from the standard automotive, we have around 100 million lines of code, which is predicted to be 300 million lines of code by 2030. Yeah, and if you compare maybe a fighter jet, somewhere it is 1/5 of that at this point of time. So with this kind of explosion of the devices which are in the car, as well as the number of lines of code, the software which is there, the vulnerability of the vehicle is increasing, and cybersecurity is becoming much more critical than in the past. So what are the kind of prominent attacks, and where did we start talking about cybersecurity? I think the first time when there was a huge awareness built was in the Jeep incident, which happened in 2015. And this was done by two white hat hackers, where they actually could change the parameters inside a Jeep vehicle. And they actually did it through tampering the entertainment system. And they could get control to the steering and every other, the brake system and all other all the other parameters inside the vehicle. And this was one of the incidences what we have had. And that is when exactly cybersecurity started becoming the talked topic in the automotive industry. And later, as you can see that, every year, every month, we see there are a lot more incidents which are happening and which are getting much more critical. The other one, which is very predominant, is the Tesla app, which can, the car gets stolen, and it started in 2015, and even in 2020, it could not be fixed by Tesla. We could see that within a matter of 10 seconds, they could steal the car. Yeah, and that is, by a BLE device, they could actually do it. And again, if you look at, BMW, many other OEMs, I don't want to name OEMs here, I think everybody has faced the cyber attack. And the last one which came in India now is the Maruti Suzuki planned operations getting halted due to a cyber attack. So there has been multiple events, and it is very clear that we are working on a moving target because the attackers are getting smarter, even though we have white hat attackers who are actually helping us to build the use case, it is pretty clear that the hackers are getting much more smarter, and they are finding more and more gateways into getting into the vehicle per se. So cyber attack in automotive, if you look at it, it's very interesting to see that more than 50% of all the reported automotive-related cybersecurity incidents, it happened during the past 2 years alone, which means it is kind of exponentially increasing, and that's actually a matter of concern to all of us. The second matter of concern is that the number of black hat hackers, it is increasing because black hat are the ones who have the malicious intent, and they want to steal data or maybe tamper with the vehicles and so on, whereas the white hat, they are the people who are actually supporting us to build cases and to unearth the different cases which we can have, and we have 4% of the other hat. So these black hat hackers is something which is of a big concern for the industry at this point of time. And another interesting point is that if you can see that 80% of the hacking which has happened, it was nowhere near, there was no proximity to the vehicle at all. Around, most of them were remote. Between 2010 and 2020, I think this is the scenario which is really worrying, because somewhere sitting in some corner of the world, somebody can actually hack our system. And there are different vectors, I'll come to that. So that's actually very interesting. And if you can see the number, this is kind of mind-blowing. We have got $505 billion potential cumulated in 5 years losses until 2024. So this is actually quite scary what we have. And considering the fact that we are moving more towards EXE, we are getting more electrified vehicle, more automated, more connected, more yearly updated. This is an increasing matter of concern for the entire mobility ecosystem, I would say. It's not only for the OEM, but for everybody here. So what we can see is there are different attack vectors that are being used by the, by the attacker. And if you see that the predominant one, the biggest one, is the key fob. That is the 22.2 key fob. This is one of the things which was used in the Tesla incident. Then we have, another one is getting access into the electronic control unit, the transmission control unit, and the gateways, and followed by mobile app infotainment, the OBD port, IT networks, and so on. The trend would change, because if you look at, this data is, for the last few years, the number of mobile apps that have access to the vehicle, the number of infotainment channel, and those are increasing now. So which means that probably the trend that we saw till now may not hold good for the next year. We might have, different reasons or different vectors. This percentages might change entirely. Maybe we have an ECU, TCU coming down, and maybe if you look at it, a mobile app or, Wi-Fi and other topics coming higher. So which means that, there is also a shift in how the market and the technology changes with respect to cybersecurity. And if you look at the global cybersecurity clients' software revenue, the software revenue by type itself can be categorized. One is predominantly into the ECU software, the bus network software, and the gateway software. And you can see that it kind of, there's a huge increase, and the prediction up to 2028, which they call it a real conservative projection itself, is quite huge in terms of the million USD. And similarly, if you look at the off-board, the security operation centers and the in-vehicle cybersecurity software also, you can see there is a huge trend which is there. So this is going to be one of the in things, and this is one of the areas that probably everybody sitting in this room have to pay focus on. Because initially it was the OEM's business, but now it's not the OEM or the supplier business, it's the entire ecosystem who contributes toward this. So the awareness and the prevention is actually really required from all the parties. So what are the different challenges that we have? One is the new emerging attacks. I will come to that. The second one is, the know-how of the criminals also are increasing, like in every field. And, IT cybersecurity was not it was existing for quite some time, but with respect to the automotive, there are many more challenges that is coming in. And we are looking at phishing, ransomware, social engineering, IoT attacks as a huge sector. And the impact what it has is huge. It's not only the reputation impact, is one major thing. Yeah, like every recall which happens, you have a major reputation impact. The other thing is, many of the times when you have these attacks, the personal data is also stolen. So when you have the personal data stolen, that has a huge impact on that. And if you talk about an electric vehicle, through the charging station, it is possible that we kind of jeopardize even the charging infrastructure and the whole ecosystem as a whole. So the impact is very huge. And again, when we talk about the connected vehicles and the automated vehicles, when we're talking about L1 to L5 automated cars, especially in an L5, when we are talking of a driverless scenario, having a cybersecurity issue there, I don't think I need to explain what could be the kind of consequence that we have. So there are different regulators which are coming in with different policies at this point of time, but the industry has to catch up. Like many other topics, auto industry is a little bit slow in this also. The standardization is a topic that we are battling with in many areas in this as well. And the security, we need to understand that security is everyone's responsibility. Everybody who contributes to it, for example, if that can be the OEM, it can be the multiple supplier, it can be an open source provider, it can be the hardware provider, the network, the IT. It becomes everybody's joint responsibility, right? And more over the air coming in automotives. As I mentioned earlier, when the value of the car increasing, it is through the OTA. And when that happens, it is clear that we are getting more vulnerable to these kind of attacks. And last but not the least, as I mentioned, standardization is only evolving, and it will take a little bit more time in the industry. So it has to change a little bit faster. Now, if you look at what are the changes that are occurring in the industry and what changed from the past to now. So there were kind of standard attacks which were looking at, the ECU, TCU kind of sector, but there are new things which are coming in the market, either because of business models or because of technology. So one is the vehicle subscription services itself. No, this was not existing. So this is actually something which gives access to personal data. So this can be a topic. The second one is electric vehicles are getting more and more popular. So the EV infrastructure, what we have, as well as the EV charging network, that is also one of the elements which can cause attacks. Fleet management system, the commercial vehicles, the fleet management systems, again, a lot to do with the personal data. So this we need to take care. And the new insurance model. So what's the new insurance model? It is nothing but that depending upon your driving pattern, whether you are a rash driver, then you need to pay more insurance, if not. So you have a lot of your behavior patterns which are captured. And this is also dangerous data to be with the cyber attackers. The smart mobility APIs and the different third-party apps which are developed, these are integrated into the vehicles. Earlier, this was not a facility, and this kind of APIs also can create a lot of issues because one is that it is completely remote. Another thing is that you don't need to have a depth of knowledge to do it. So that's again issue. Shared ownership of vehicle, when we talked about EXE, the S part of it, which is the shared ownership, that again makes it more vulnerable. And last but not the least, the location triggered alerts that people know at any point of time where you are, and the coordinates are known, and that's also poses a lot of risk into the system. So cybersecurity, the key requirements, I would say there are 5 important things. One is the acknowledgement part itself. The second one is the product security management. The third is cybersecurity by design, nothing but starting from the hardware, the software, the network, and the cloud. In every area, we need to have a security by design. Since we are talking about an ecosystem where you have, co-creation through collaboration, that's the way the industry is moving. So the information sharing and cooperation becomes a topic. And last but not the least, the cybersecurity culture inside the organization. So in Continental, we see it as, 3 parts. One is the domain-specific regulations, the horizontal regulations, what we have. The domain-specific is mostly the UNECE, the Work Package 29, which addresses a lot of cybersecurity topic. The horizontal one is, the EU Radio Equipment Directive and the country-specific one. And last but not the least, the standardization, which is on the ISO and the SAE 21434. So based on that, there is a need for a product security management, cyber security management system, which in turn will have the security management. We need to have a good amount of competency management as well as a CSMS monitoring. And also, you need to have a SOC, which is along with that. So when we look at the security by design, it is clear that the assessment and the initiation has to be done from the very beginning of the project, up to the production or even after that. And this also includes the secure coding guidelines, what we have, the following of standards. So the first thing is basically to identify which are the data and which are the assets which are prone for cybersecurity issues. The second one is to actually protect them, the second part. And the third one is to have the frameworks and the guidelines which are available so that, these kind of attacks, if they occur, how exactly we can mitigate them. And the last but not the least is basically through sharing best practices to make the system much more robust. So it sounds a lot of common sense. It's nothing rocket science, but at the same time, implementing it is not as simple as it can be, because as I mentioned, when these multiple parties are coming together with the different elements in the automotive, it is not very simple to do the product security by design as such. Very important is also the culture part, the security culture part, because the quality of the deliverable, it always depends upon the culture of the organization as well and the culture of trust. And I will come to one of the points in the latest technologies, how exactly we are looking at the culture of trust and how does it affect the organization of the security. The development processes have to be established that it becomes a way of life. It has to be the DNA of the organization rather than only a kind of a protocol what we have. And we also need to have a lot of audits. That's what we do at Continental, a very rigorous audits for all the security relevant products. And we also have SOCs set up for everything starting from manufacturing to the production. So the third part is information and collaboration. As I mentioned, this is not something which can be managed alone by one party because of multiple parties collaborating and co-creating the system. And each of these organizations bring in vulnerability to the table. And that can actually jeopardize the system. So how do you have each organization, how do you ensure that these incidents are not coming? And how are how is it periodically validated? How does it fed back into the system? That's very important. And we need to have defined rules for information exchange and best practice sharing, which is a very, very weak point in the automotive space at this point of time. And also the usage of latest technology in the cybersecurity. There is a lot that we can learn from the IT systems, because in the IT space, the cybersecurity has been existing for a long time. A lot to learn, but as I mentioned, the target is different and the technology is different. So one of it is what is gaining popularity, to use a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning into it, where they analyze a lot amount of data and look at the patterns and then come with predictions. What kind of potential attacks could come? So that kind of prediction building is actually helping it. Second one, which is gaining very popularity, is the behavioral biometrics. So what is behavioral biometrics is nothing but when a cyber criminal actually uses the mouse pad or maybe touch screen and so on, probably the patterns of usage is very different than how a normal developer or normal human being uses. So behavior analytics actually will help to detect these patterns, and then when they interact with devices, there is a high probability of finding that whether it is a cyber attack or not. And the third one is zero trust architecture, which means that you don't trust anybody in the organization extremely well. Yeah, so every level, starting from the entry level to the CEO, we have to have authentication, double authentication, and strict identification of identity for every device as well as person who are coming into the organization's network. Blockchain, this distributed ledger technique actually can help us a lot for actually having a lot of secure data storage that really help. And since cloud is in the game and we cannot run mobility without the cloud, we need to have this multi-factor authentications, and the encryption and the access control for data in the cloud also becomes a very important element. And last but not the least, since we are talking about IoT security, IoT devices, the encryption, the success control and the monitoring with respect to this also is also predominantly coming in. So coming to my last slide, to summarize, I would say that in the EXE world, cybersecurity is not a competitive offering. It is just a mandatory thing for us to move forward. And this is a moving target. The attacks as well as the impacts, all of them are moving targets. So we need to be alert. We need to find new ways, new technologies, and take it forward. Second thing is identifying and addressing the common vectors of attack. As I mentioned, the vectors of attack are changing now because of the different business models which are coming in and the different technologies which are coming in. So identifying it and addressing it is important. Cybersecurity by design, starting from the factory to the scrapyard, very, very critical. You can't avoid it at any point of time. And we also need to understand that security is not, in one part of the value chain. In the entire part of the value chain, it involves a large number of activities and technologies across the life cycle. So this is something which needs to be taken care. And in this ecosystem, it's a collective responsibility of all the players of the mobility. It's not only of the OEM. And last but not the least, there are new technologies which needs to be deployed for detection, analysis, prediction, prevention, and even mitigation. So this is how we need to progress about it. So again, I would like to emphasize that it's not a competitive offering. This is something which is mandatory that all of us have to follow and all of us have to contribute. And it can work only if you have the best practice sharing, because we need to build more and more cases, more and more use cases, which actually makes our standards much better. That's the only way for cybersecurity to move forward in the industry. So yeah, so that's from my side. So thank you very much for listening.